am making. As long as you are attached to any model of the universe, to any level of definition of who you are or how it works, you are closed off from the rest of it. And the state of no mind, the Buddhist state of no mind, is where you have finished with models. You don't even be enlightened. You don't be anything. There's just no mind. And because you don't have any models, every moment is a totally, look, I am making all things new situation. It's all happening straight all over again because you didn't have a prefixed model that you're just reinforcing or rejecting.
Hello, amazing ones, and welcome to another Ram Dass Here and Now episode. This is number 242, The State of No Mind. And it's taken from a Ram Dass talk at Colby College in Maine in April of 1970. And it makes me wonder, what would it be like to fully live in the Tao, to fully trust that intuitive knowing completely, and to just sort of constantly, moment by moment, let go of what we know ourselves to be and how we think of the world into sort of a greater perspective. And I think probably many of us get glimpses of that from time to time, either through meditation or psychedelics or, crocheting, breath work, skiing, rock climbing, whatever your method is. This state where the mind stops pulling this way and that, and just for that split second comes to rest. And then we are sort of able to touch something beyond our normal state of consciousness. The Buddhists, I think they call this the state of no mind, which is what he's talking about in this episode. And it's the Yoga Sutras go to great pains to describe how to get to this state. Even though we all probably glimpse this state of mind from time to time, I think for most of us, it's just fleeting. Almost immediately, our perspectives come back into play. It's almost like we're addicted to our perspectives. We believe something, and then we collect evidence to reinforce that belief. Sometimes it's an idea about ourselves, our sense of worth or enoughness or capacity or sense of separateness. Sometimes it's about other people and how we judge them and who we believe them to be. And, it's bigger too. It's our politics and our religions and just how we think the world works. And that's what this lecture is about. That's what Ram Dass is delving into, this habit of perspective. I think scientists might call it belief perseverance, or maybe it's even neuroplasticity. I know the yogis called it samskaras and vasanas. And, Ram Dass does this brilliant thing he always does, is he holds the paradox, how it's so natural to have perspective and so natural to cling to it. And yet by doing so, we limit our own capacity to really know the fullness of ourselves, to know the world. And so he does this, as always, with these wonderful and wild and deep and even challenging stories. And he does it with such humor and clarity. So we hope you enjoy and get something really brilliant from today's lecture. And you have a chance to share your own perspective about perspectives at the upcoming Soul Pod meetup. And this is where we practice together. We practice meditation and chanting, and we practice being together in community, sharing our stories and listening to each other from the heart. And this practice of satsang, it's a big part of what Ram Dass wanted his legacy to be, to continue into the future. And it only happens when we show up. So take the plunge. It's 75 minutes of your day, once every 2 weeks. And all you have to do is go to ramdass.org/fellowship and sign up, and then you will get the invitations. As always, we hope you are well nourished by this episode and these teachings, and whatever good comes from them, may they benefit all of us in our daily lives, and ripple out into the world for the benefit of all beings. So, here is Ram Dass, here and now. Namaste and blessings.
Perspectives about your own life is not easy because whatever perspective we have is designed to perpetuate itself. By reinforcing positive instances and rejecting others. So, for example, when I was a behavioral scientist, strange as it may seem to some of you looking at me up here in this weird scene. If I studied some personality variable and I got a correlation of 0.5, which means 50%, which means the correlation, which means that I'd explain 25% of the variance, meaning 75% of the relationship between these variables I didn't know anything about. I would interpret that, of course, as error or as poor instrumentation that I hadn't operationally defined my variables correctly. Or that I hadn't measured enough of the variable. Multiple variables. I never thought my theories were wrong. Or that I was concentrating on the wrong level of the game. Because my perspective as a social scientist was self-perpetuating. Then my mind got blown by drugs, and then for years I was in the drug mythos. Now, all I mean by that is not that psychedelics didn't play as crucial a role in my journey as they have. and that I certainly honor them now. But that, as the Vedas point out, every method has within it a trap, whatever it is, because you tend to get hooked on your method. And you get hooked on your method. Call it your method for getting high. Everybody's got a method for getting high. Some people it's books, problem solving. Some it's sex. Some it's surfing. Some it's going off by themselves in nature. Some it's meditating. Some it's doing pranayama or breath control. Some it's turning on. Whatever your method, there is a tendency to get hooked on it and say, if your method's sex, you say, hey man, you're not into sex, baby. Where are you at? You must be pathological because I get my kicks from it. The scholar, to see somebody who doesn't read books, just feels that it's very poignant. Because that's his trip. Now, there's nothing wrong with everybody having a trip. In fact, doing your thing is absolutely the optimum harmonious living in the Tao. You're a tree, you bud, and then you leave, and then you drop your leaves, and then you wait around, and then you grow another ring. You just do your thing. Give shade. It's nice to lean against. You don't collect kudos for it or anything, you're just doing your thing. If you're water, you do its thing, your thing. You flow downstream. You don't say, shall I flow downstream today? You don't fear getting to the bottom of the stream, you're just flowing downstream because that's your thing. And as man learns to live in nature, he starts to listen to the harmony of it all, to see exactly what his thing is. Is the design of a man to be a pollutant? The design of a man to up-level himself, to make himself an anachronism? The design of a man to enjoy himself? Is it anthropocentric? It was all designed for man's pleasure? Is man merely food for the moon in his magnetic field? Brigitte says that the body nourishes the earth, the magnetic field of man nourishes the moon when he dies, and his consciousness nourishes the sun. It's all perspective. All perspectives, like what are we doing here at this moment? Who are we? Who did you think you were when you walked in here? Who did you think you were, and what did you think you were coming to do? I'm sure any of us could just calm down and project himself into each of the rest of us and pretty well come up with a reasonable set of descriptions of why people would say, I'm going here at 8:30. Having a perspective or having a thing is, as I say, very harmonious. Being addicted to it or stuck in it is quite another matter. Or being under the impression that it is, quote, reality. It's quite another matter. That is, I can sit here and talk to you as long as I equally know that there is no one talking. I can listen to you when you speak as long as I realize that there is nobody listening. The minute I forget that, either in either direction, either forget that there is nobody listening or think that there is nothing to hear, I have lost one half of the wisdom of the ages. The minute I get hooked on sanskara, the minute I get hooked on form, on Maya, on the Divine Mother, the minute I get seduced in again into the experiencer of bliss, divine duality, dualism, as soon as I forget that my Father and I are one, as soon as I forget the unity, then I am never wise, I can just be knowledgeable. See, I can look at this evening as, here we are all consciousness, except the consciousness is vibrating at a certain frequency, which we'll call this plane, we'll call it the gross physical plane for fun. And in order, at this level, the consciousness manifests in different ways, which is really a different sort of description of a set of unfolding karmic potentiality. And so when I look out, I see I looking out, and I see all this, and I see this spirit or consciousness just manifested in a multitude of forms, including the microphone in the building. And I think, wow, man, the Divine Mother really comes in some far-out forms. Walking through New York yesterday, I look at a big garbage truck coming down the street, and I say, oh, wow, I love you, Divine Mother. Garbage men look at me like, there's another one of them. You don't go worshiping garbage trucks. Haven't I told you? Recently I was in Los Angeles, and it was a very far out night, and Los Angeles is kind of a cult city. It's sort of, it's a totally astral city. I mean, everybody knows it's all made of cardboard, you see, so it makes it very easy. But it's a weird occult city, and cultish also. And very many people are into the model of dualistic, like worship or something like that. So I did my thing, and I get very high off all the energy. See, just went out, and everybody got a contact high from it. So they all figured, wow, there he is. So instead of realizing that they're the one that's a high, they attribute, like it to me. So they came up afterwards, and about 200 people were standing around, and they started to come and touch my feet. I was just meditating. I was just sitting in this place. This was about midnight at the Unitarian Church on Vermont and 8th in Los Angeles. And here's a good Jewish boy from Boston sitting up here cross-legged, and thousands, like not thousands, hundreds of people are coming up to touch my feet. I think, oh, wow. Father Coughlin and all possible trips. Say, Billy Graham never had it. Because he couldn't allow himself to enjoy it. Just another addict. Addiction's a very serious problem in our culture. Well, after these people had, I sat meditating, and I realized, see, in India, it's perfectly all right, because when somebody touches your feet, because you're dressed like a sadhu and you are a seeker, you don't rebel or revolt or anything. They're honoring that in you, which is what you're working to become. And if you were out of the illusion, you'd realize you were it already. And they're just helping you do your trip by reminding you who you are. They're honoring that in you, which is the high place. And at the moment when they do that, they are giving you pran. and at the same moment they're taking prana from that place in their minds. They're creating their universe. You can create your universe. So at the same moment, you are honoring them. You're touching their feet in your head, in your heart. You're honoring them. You're honoring the God in them, because there can be no difference in role ultimately. We're all consciousness, just manifest in different forms. But as I sat in Los Angeles, you see, it's a completely different setting, culture, motivation, and I went through a number of trips watching this process happen. It was like an interesting thing happened to me in India. I was sitting at the temple one day. I was very, very high, in a very high state. I had been doing a lot of meditation and fasting, and I was at the temple, and I was in a very low state of samadhi, very low, but waves of bliss and so on. And I felt these hands massaging my legs. I came down into form to experience this happening. Well, that's a weird experience. Sitting alone out under a tree, and suddenly you feel this. And I sort of half opened my eyes, sort of see what it was about. And there were these two old people who were making a religious pilgrimage to the temple, and they had seen a sadhu sitting there meditating. And they came over to do their part to make, to loosen up your legs and relax you and honor you and do this whole process of helping the work, since you're doing the thing. And they were doing it with absolute purity of intent, and I just was over. It was like they gave me a huge shot of spiritual energy, just And I closed my eyes. I never met them. I never saw them again. And then about a month later, I was down in Bareilly, and I was at the train station, going to take the night train to Delhi. And it's a very far out scene. It was mobbed, and we were in the lowest sphere thing where you sit so that maybe in a little space little tiny car, there are maybe 100 people. And you sit right crammed in with your knees up, and you go 14 hours at about 18 miles an hour. See, and there's just so much frustration, you surrender into it, which is exactly what you have to do with the Divine Mother, India. You just have to, because if you sit right, it's all horrible. You can create a horror. And I was kind of looking forward to this, and a coachman from the train, a baggage master, came along and he said, sadhus, American sadhus, from America, yeah. He said, empty baggage car for you. He took us and put us in an empty baggage car they weren't using, and he said, I won't let anybody in here, just you two. Gee, that's very nice. It wasn't exactly comfortable. There were these little things in the thing to hold the bags, but you could find a way. Closed the door, and we were sitting there meditating as the train started very slowly, and he said, when I want to come in, I will knock. So when he knocks, so we let him in at one of the stations along the way. And I'm meditating, and my guru brother lets him in. And I'm very comfortable going along with the train, and I suddenly feel his hands massaging my leg. I think, oh, wow, it's happening again. Too good. It's like 2 sauna baths in 1 week. And it's very like bathing. It's very high. And I was just starting to enjoy it, and I suddenly felt that his hands were going higher and higher up my legs. Until finally he had my genitals in his hand. And suddenly, it took me a long time to come back into this other model of what was in his mind, what his intent was. He was both worshiping me and enjoying me. And all I did was I made myself like a statue. I mean, I just left my body, and then it's like he's making love to a dead being. Since that wasn't his trip, he just sort of lost interest. And then he filled the car with other people all night long. I can't keep it for you two. And they just made love on the upper tiers all night long. Now you go up there. Now you. Very far out scene. But what it did was it gave me, that second take on somebody working their hand, working your legs with their hands was the model that I would have started with in America. Immediately would have been a sexual overture. Then the older people showed me another perspective, and then when I tried to generalize that perspective, of course, that was wrong too. So I'm in Los Angeles now, and Los Angeles is like in the railroad car. You know, I can have people touch my feet, but if their intent was pure enough, but obviously there's a lot of funny games going in all of our heads about things like that. Finally, I just stood up and I looked at everybody and I said, well, everybody, that's showbiz. And I walked off. That's what I mean by perspective. Whatever model you came in here with in your head as to who you were and where you were going and where you are when you're here is definitely the wrong one. Just because it is one. And as long as you're not hooked in it, you can move from level to level but if you're hooked on it, it's too bad. It's just very pointless. Recently I went to the Boston State Hospital to their heroin addiction center. It was an afternoon staff meeting of about 30 heroin addicts and about 30 staff members, psychiatrists and social workers and so on. And I came in and I sat down on the floor, and everybody sat in chairs, even the heroin addicts. And I started to talk. And after I had done my thing for a while, people started to ask questions. And the psychiatrist asked psychiatrist-type questions. And the heroin addicts asked heroin addict-type questions. And I answered holy man-type answers. But then I noticed quite an interesting situation. That I could say what I just said. And that there were a goodly percentage of the heroin addicts in the room who could say what I just said. But there were very few of the psychiatrists who could say what I just said. And it suddenly dawned on me that the psychiatrists were more addicted than the heroin addicts. Addicted to being psychiatrists. And this was a hard take for me because I had come to study the addiction problem. I suddenly looked into a heroin addict's eyes, and here he was. And now, he wasn't on heroin at that moment. If he was on heroin at that moment, man, he'd be like a psychiatrist. He'd be having none of it. I mean, the psychiatrists were completely freaked by me. Because I was talking all that other talk. Crazy talk. About astral planes, and psychosis being an addiction to the wrong plane of reality. Getting hooked in some other place. Some of you are here because you're collectors. Collecting knowledge? How about experiences? Collecting experience. Maybe a high experience tonight, you never know. Collecting tapes. Used to raise hamsters, and they just, no matter how much food you gave them, they kept collecting. Pretty soon they had to climb over these huge, I just kept giving them as much as they wanted. They kept, pretty soon they had to climb over huge mountains of stuff just because they couldn't stop collecting. If you gave it to them, they collected. like God and Satan walking down the street, and God kicks something and he picks it up, and Satan says, "What is it you have there, sir?" God says, "That's truth." Satan says, "Well, here, give it to me, I'll organize it." That's where institutions are at. You can be part of them as long as who you are isn't part of them. You get stuck in any perspective, just so poignant. It's all collecting. I dug on the way over here. I was thinking about schools, and I thought of the term, what is Colby? And I thought, what went through my mind was a finishing school. See? And then I thought, well, what does that mean? Is that pejorative? Is that a terrible thing, going up and saying to everybody, you're at a finishing school? I thought, finishing with what? See? I knew it meant finish like starch, you know, finishing the things you could do your thing, you know, like preparing, finishing, socializing, acculturating, getting you straight. But I took the other meaning of finishing being ending. And I saw that what school was speeding up was the process of your finishing with it. And what you're finishing with is attachment to the external. Attachment to the external. Attachment, as Buddha would say. There's a term in Hindi, in Sanskrit, called virag. Virag is, there's many, many translations of it. One of them is unworldliness. I'd almost say naivete, but it doesn't mean that. It means being free of worldly things, being finished with worldly things. Like, I had a motorcycle, and I drove the motorcycle, up in Stanford and Palo Alto, and up into the hills behind the campus, and along the ocean on the sand in the middle of moonlit nights, and I did hill climbing, and I did the whole motorcycle trip. We went on, you know, trips and trips and trips, trips and trips. Until there came a point where the motorcycle just sat in the garage, and when I go out, I'd get into the sports car instead of the motorcycle, right? Because I'd sort of had it with motorcycles. I mean, in the one night you're driving down from San Francisco and it's ice cold, and you've got a New York Times you bought just to stuff in your jacket because it's the thickest one, and a bottle of brandy in your. This was in 1953 or something. Bottle of brandy in my hip, and I'm driving, you know, and it's freezing cold, and I think, what the hell am I doing? Is this what it's all going to be about? And in a way, I was sort of done with motorcycling. It's groovy to go out on a nice day and motorcycle, but the thing is done. And the same thing happened with me with airplanes. I had a little airplane, and I fly in dangerous things and through thunderstorms. So finally, I just be sitting over Salt Lake City, you know, at 100 miles an hour, where nothing's happening. You just go up 4 hours, you ride, then you land, you go to the toilet, have a milkshake, get in the plane, get up, go 4 hours,